Welcome to today's episode on me reviewing highlights. It's going to be a busy day for me today, so it's been a busy week, couple of weeks. That's why my videos are not being so regular. But yeah, let's get started today. So switching, and here we go. The first one is from the earned life. We have the opportunity to be empathic dozens of times a day, and each time is an opportunity to display empathy either well or poorly. If you've ever come home and neglected your family members because you were still preoccupied with the empathic emotions you felt upon listening to a colleague's problems, you have seen the hazards of empathy overdone or done poorly. There is a lot to unpack over here, and each of it is quite lengthy. Each of it is a lengthy discussion in its own right. And on one hand, it's talking about uh, some of the criticisms I've heard about empathy, and I have. That was really weird when I heard criticisms about empathy. But I suppose yes, that there are hazards when when there is a criticism. It doesn't really mean that it's all bad, right? So empathy, like anything, if you overdo it, it can lead to problems, and this is one example of that. That um, the example over here, if you're dealing with a colleague's emotional problems and you're still still have misplaced empathy at a time when you should be, when your focus should be elsewhere, on your family members. So yes, each time is an opportunity to display empathy either well or poorly, and I think that's really significant. It's a very hard thing. It's not easy. I can just sit here and say that be empathetic in every moment doesn't really work like that. All of us know that. So it's an opportunity, and we miss it many times, and at each opportunity we have at each moment we have an opportunity to do better. We'll move on. The molecule of more. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter whose purpose is to maximize future reward, starts us down the road to love. It revs our desires, illuminates our imagination, and draws us into a relationship on an incandescent promise. But when it comes to love, dopamine is a place to begin, not to finish. It can never be satisfied. Dopamine can only say more. It's it goes on to say that the feeling of happiness, the feeling of satisfaction that you get, and the implication over here, dopamine is a place to begin, not to finish. The finish really happens. The satisfaction, the happiness comes from the chemicals, or the chemicals called in this book as HNN chemicals, here and now chemicals, and I believe they are oxytocin and a few others. So it's at various points the book is trying to show different a balance between dopamine and the here and now chemicals, which uh, which is what leads to happiness. Dopamine is required. It Dopamine can only say more, but we need that drive. We need that the tendency for us of ourselves to say that we need more. That ambition, that drive, we need that. But at the same time, we also need the breaks, so to speak, that the HRN chemicals provides, and which tells us that okay, we are happy now. We can be happy now. We can be satisfied right now, and it's that balance that leads us to healthy lives. Let's move on. Thanks for the feedback. The very first task in assessing feedback is figuring out what kinds of feedback we're dealing with. Broadly, feedback comes in three forms: appreciation, which is thanks; coaching, here's a better way to do something; and evaluation, here's where you stand. This is a kind of a summary of, as an initial summary of the book. The book goes on to talk about each of these different types of feedback in more detail in the later sections. So yeah, it's just a summary that the feedback comes in three forms: appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. And pretty much all kinds of feedback can be boiled down into one of these things. So that's it. Let's move on. Kill it with fire. Don't design the organization. Let the organization design itself by choosing a structure that facilitates the communication teams will need to get the job done. I think this essentially talks to us about Conway's law, which is that organization, or the software mirrors or the software architectures mirror the organization design, really. So the point the author is making over here, in an evolving organization, something that's scaling up from a startup, um, there can be many models that you can fit your organization into. You can say that, okay, you can you can study various models different organizations have done, and you should. I don't think the author is suggesting that you shouldn't. You should study different models, but there is a common saying that goes along with models, that all models are wrong, some are useful. So if you go in with that attitude that all models are wrong, you're just studying them because they might be useful to you, but they're always going to be wrong. Uh, and that's what the author says further over here, that let the organization design itself. Of course, understand how the different models work, but then uh, the teams in your organization, how they communicate with each other, let the organization be built from that. And that's kind of um, it's very similar to the what's called as reverse convey maneuver, except that you're doing it from the beginning. You're not doing it during a restructure or something. You're doing it right from the beginning. So yeah, let's move on to remote, not distant. On a good day, culture feels invisible. On a bad day, it's too obvious. No one notices a smooth performance, but toxic behaviors quickly catch the eye. This is quite apparent that if something's going well, we don't really notice it. And so on a good day, culture feels invisible. It's just the way things are over here. There's nothing much to talk about. Everything's okay, everything's normal. That's all we can say. But on a bad day, oh, this place has a bad culture. You can immediately say that. You can say that, okay, this place has a toxic culture, and so on. So yeah, that's probably the what the author is saying over here, is that you want the culture to be invisible. You just want to get the work done. And culture, it's important. And if it becomes too apparent that, okay, that how do I put this, that it's too obvious that something's wrong with the culture, that's really what you need to address. That's really what you need to prevent, because once that happens, it's very difficult to revert. Yeah, that's about it. Moving on, the leader's greatest return. I guess the bottom line is that to succeed a leader, you must fall in love with the leader's vision and agenda. So much so that there comes a point in the partnership where people can no longer tell whose agenda is whose. The two become so interwoven that they merge and become our agenda. And I think it's important to realize that the author is really talking about the vision and the agenda, not the methodology, not the style of working, or not even the priorities, because the vision may still be the same, priorities might slightly differ. Priorities sometimes depend on the environment, sometimes depend on the time. So yes, yeah, if you want to present a unified front in a succession as well, if you want to maintain some sense of stability within a team, um, you have to follow the vision and agenda. And I'm not saying that you can never vary from that. You can never transition. It's not something that's fixed in stone. But every change to the vision must be careful. It must be deliberate. It cannot be that, okay, who cares about that vision? I'm going in with my own vision and I'll do things differently. There must be a reason why you're doing things differently, not just for the sake of doing it. Moving on, braving the wilderness. Belonging is, yeah, belonging is the innate human desire to be part of something larger than us. Because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and by seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging but often barriers to it. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self acceptance. It's pretty straightforward, but it's a very nice summarization in the end, that our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self acceptance. So, if you want to gain a higher sense of belonging, and belonging is not trying to seek approval or trying to fit in. That's not belonging, like the author says over here. Belonging, there are there are many dimensions of ourselves, of our personalities, of our behaviors. There are many dimensions. And on a team, or in a particular organization, people don't succeed if they all mirror the same behaviors or the same personalities exactly. They don't succeed in that case. What helps them succeed is if each person brings in something unique to the team, to the table, so to speak. And we say that today we say that in the name, we put this under the name of diversity, which is very important. There are many attributes that makes us unique, not just our behaviors and not just our personalities. So fitting in that conventional sense of imitating somebody is not what leads to success. In fact, like the author says, that it's often a barrier to it, or not, definitely not seeking approval. What you want to do is present your authentic self and understand that you're bringing something positive to the team, something that nobody else can bring. The whole combination of yourself, all your behaviors, that's something that's uniquely you, that nobody else can bring to the team. And when you understand that, when you're presenting that authentic self and you're aligning yourself to the team's vision or the organization, I'm talking about team. The author is not necessarily talking about teams over here. The author is talking about all kinds of groups. But yes, I'm particularly talking about teams. Um, they this is the group that succeeds, or the team that succeeds. And the author goes on to end by saying that our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self acceptance. And that kind of leads to the realization that we have to accept ourselves first before we can positively contribute something to a team or to a group. It's just not going to happen. You'll probably just do what you're told if you're not going to accept yourself of everything that you have to offer. If you don't accept it yourself, it's very difficult for somebody else to accept it. So let's move on. Codependent no more. We need to take responsibility for communication. Let our words reflect high self esteem and esteem for others. Be honest, be direct, be open. Be gentle and loving when that's appropriate. Be firm when the situation calls for firmness. Above all else, be who we are and say what we need to say. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't really know what else I can add over here, because the author in this book in general, it is quite elaborate in its verbiage. There is nothing that's often given in hints or anything. The chapters are quite elaborate. They're very detailed, and like you can see from this highlight, it's pretty much everything is taken care of. So moving on, a mind for numbers. A master violinist, for example, doesn't just play a musical piece from beginning to end over and over again. Instead, she focuses on the hardest parts of the piece where the fingers fumble and the mind becomes confused. You should be like that in your own deliberate practice, focusing and becoming quicker at the hardest parts of the solution procedures you're trying to learn. It's the suggestion of the author that you're going to focus on the hardest parts of the music, because that's where you need the practice. That's where you need to train your brain to uh, kind of develop that muscle memory, so to speak. And that's the example that's over here. That it kind of leads to muscle memory. But that's true for everything, all kinds of learning. Anything that's complicated, that's troublesome to understand, it you only solve it by doing the thing repeatedly. That's where you make that connection. And the book goes on to talk about interleaving focus and diffuse modes. So you're focusing at certain times, and then you're going to diffuse mode, and that's when the creative spark clicks in. That, oh yeah, this is how I do it. This is how I understand something. So yeah, that's it. Let's move on. Wrong fit, right fit. These brand campaigns made cultural aspirational. These brand campaigns made culture aspirational and the day-to-day climate less and less of a priority. We began talking more about who we aspire to be than focusing on how work was actually getting done. We began to see the rise of recruiters who are expert marketers, CHROs, and chief talent officers spending time on the speakers circuit, and companies whose reality begin to veer from the ideal they aspired towards. It's referring to so this book, it's a very new book, talking about being a right fit or a wrong fit for a particular organization, and it goes both ways. Sometimes you're the wrong fit for the organization, and conversely the organization is a wrong fit for you, which is, I suppose, the same thing, because fit is a fit. If there is no fit, it's a wrong fit. So Yeah, the author is talking about different branding campaigns that we see today in terms of hiring. That I mean, not today, but like let's say about a couple of years back, when hiring was in full swing, there were huge campaigns, and that would portray the culture of a workplace, or benefits and everything. But benefits and everything were the common attractive um, with the common attractions a little earlier, but with mental wellness becoming a highlight in the recent years, it's the culture that's being portrayed mostly. And yeah, it's where was I? I kind of lost track of what I was talking about. Yeah, yeah. So these companies, they highlighted the culture, and in doing so, they made it so aspirational, so fancy, that the day to day reality, it shifted from that. And like the author says that the recruiters who are expert marketers or CHROs or chief talent officers, they're spending time on speaker circuit. They are going everywhere speaking, and they're trying to demonstrate a culture which may differ, which is slowly drifting away from the day-to-day working at the organization. And that is what leads to the problems with fitment. um, you are The book goes on to say that what you should really be trying to focus on uh, is exposing your day-to-day, what's the word for this, not operations, your day-to-day style of working. How do you work? How does work happen on a daily basis over here? Trying to show that, and trying to find fitment based on that, because everybody has a different preference of working. And chances are that not chances, there definitely are people who are following the same work style as you do, and that is even more, that's better than uh, a slightly higher technical competence. I'm not saying that you should not care about technical competence at all. You should, absolutely. But this goes beyond that, the style of working, because technical competence, technical skills and all other kinds of skills are something that can be learned. The style of working is not something that you learn, it's something that you need to change, and that is deliberate, that's much harder to do. So if you're looking to find a fitment, you're better off trying to find fitment based on the work practices, the behaviors that you demonstrate on a day-to-day basis, not what you advertise. And with that, let's end. It's one of the high longest videos I've made. It's almost coming up to 18 minutes. So it's good, I think, and I'll just end over here and not let it touch 18 minutes. All right, have a good day.